everyone, we're back. We're back. He's at a wedding. The fat angry guy's at a wedding in Poland. You know, Poland. Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? Poland. Yes, of course. And I know our millions and millions of followers are all happy that we're making videos again. And this one's a little bit differently. This one's a little bit different. We're not just editing little bits of streams together. I've made this one in response to something in particular. Perspective philosophy. I nearly said inspiring philosophy. These people and the names. Put a post on Twitter about a month or so ago. Oh, give me your best arguments, atheists. Come on, give me your best arguments. Debunk them on a stream. And then I gave him a bunch. He only did one. Time is precious and all that. Whatever. And his answer was so laughably bad. I decided that I'd make a response video, and I don't want to make a response video to everything, but if you put me in a stream, I have to do Johnny YouTube things and do the Johnny YouTube response video. So here we go. Now, before we start, let's stroke him a little bit. I would like to talk to you, personally, just because I feel some of your answers are wholly disingenuous. Maybe we could discuss some of the questions you didn't answer, and then we can discuss your. He's a socialist, you see. And I'm all for socialism, being a socialist myself. And I find it very weird that a socialist would be Catholic, that thing that takes money from the poor to pretend to be charitable while it hoards all of its wealth in its city-state and keeps its own autonomy while it pretends to be democratic while also listening to God. I don't know. The whole thing sounds weird to me, yo. Let's all pull out your telescopes. Let's get our math books ready. Let's do a video. And by the way, I do want to talk to you. And, like and subscribe and do all the YouTube things. Hi. Welcome to two-part video. Thank you. I'm a professional.
Just say the word and you're forgiven. And have no fear 'cause he is risen. Before you realize the rapture ensues. In this world in front of me, becomes a fading memory. Rejoice just as the choir sings. Rejoice now. Tell me of again. Under the desert sun, and it only makes you stronger when they're fucking with your head. When they're fucking with your head, and it only makes you stronger. Forgiveness, it helps you when you're dead.
The fact that religion doesn't argue from facts, well, I very much disagree.
Would you like to name one of those facts then? Just one. If you're going to send up a little, I'm going to get all the atheists and do a stream about it thing, like you've done on Twitter and then whatever. But, so if you're going to do that, and you ask specifically for the best arguments, well, why don't you give some of the best defenses then? Because, hey, you just want to assert that the Bible has facts. So let's discuss those facts, right? And when we discuss those facts, we can see which ones are facts, things that might actually happened, like the Babylonian conquest of Israel, right? Judah, it's this other one. Whatever, one of the two kingdoms. You know what I mean? Anyway, that is fact that happened, right? But if you want to say, and we can do that, we can look that up by, archaeological records, different stuff like that, different steles that have information on it, whatever. But you want to talk about the resurrection of Jesus? That's not a fact. The fact that the fact that you say it happened is a fact, but it's an opinion. It's not a fact. And just because you really want it to be doesn't mean that it is.
And hopes. I don't think so either. If there was proof of God as concrete as proof of oxygen, then it would be shouted from the rooftops. But instead, we hide outside the houses of the universe. He hides outside the universe.
Now, I'm not I'm only going to point this out once. I don't really want to make fun of him for like having either trouble reading, because maybe he has dyslexia. Maybe I also just type badly, especially on Twitter. But I'm not going to make fun of it. But I'm going to leave it in just because I can't be asked cutting the video more than I already have to.
I think that there is proof of God, and I think that I think the complexity of something like that is difficult for people to comprehend. I think there is difficult philosophical explanation. I think that the proof of oxygen is very different. I think proving something which is essentially it's essentially perceiving like an atomic structure, or perceiving like the effects of that atomic structure.
The proof of oxygen is more just than perceiving atomic structure, but that is how easy it is to prove oxygen. Oxygen was only discovered when they were trying to, disprove phlogiston, because, physics and chemistry was at its earliest inceptions. We still didn't know a lot. See, the point of the question, of that part of the question, is that it is very easy, right, to know how to prove oxygen, right? And since it's so easy to prove oxygen, you're even saying that it's very easy to prove oxygen. Oxygen is not, even though we call it an element or an atom, it's not just one part, is it? We thought it was, and then, oh no, it's got electrons, it's got protons, blah, 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 blah. It's got all these fundamental parts to it, and even those parts break down into other fundamental parts, up quarks, down quarks, blah, 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 whatever, right? And we've discovered all this stuff, and we have proof that it all exists. At somewhere in that, we should have been able to see some proof of God, do you not think? If we can so fundamentally prove something like the existence of oxygen, and not just elements oxygen, which is what, 23% of the atmosphere, which is not even a great deal of the atmosphere, you know what I mean? So we've taken something we can't see, that is a small part of something we can't see, right? And discovered it, and proved that it's made of other constituent parts. So we can do that, and we do it with such regularity that you could just say, well, you can't compare God and oxygen to be the same thing. But we can. God is part of the universe. Oxygen is part of the universe. You're saying that he doesn't hide outside the universe, so if he doesn't hide outside the universe, he's part of the universe, isn't he? So he must be able to be seen. It's almost like it's the whole point of the question.
Like chemical compounds, not too difficult to prove. So yeah, but I think that there is proof for God. I just think that it requires, well, to be fair, I think proof of oxygen, I mean,
would you like to say what that proof of God is? And hopefully it's not just a philosophical argument full of hopes and dreams. Oh, well, if there's one universe, then it's multiple universes, and that infinite possible worlds must have an ultimate being, and that ultimate being's God, and if he's in one of them, he's in all of them. Ah! Like, everything has a creator, does it? Seems like quarks kind of pop in and out of existence without need of a creator, don't they? It's weird. It's almost like the creatorless. Oh. But like, even aside from that, the universe, again, it's all hopes and dreams. It's a bunch of stuff they couldn't possibly know, and because they don't know the answer, well, if we can argue about not knowing the answer philosophically, well then, bam, it must be God, because God is the thing we can't figure out. He's the missing X from the equation of life.
like I guess like the way in which science, like I don't even think it's necessarily harder to prove God than it is to prove oxygen in many ways. Like, I don't think it is. I just think that the way in which people engage with religion versus science has probably led to, and specifically the differences in the object have led to many different interpretations and counter arguments against certain arguments for God.
Whereas when we prove oxygen, different arguments don't matter, because we have verifiable proof that, like you said, it's very easy to prove oxygen. All right, it's very easy to prove oxygen. Just a second, let me just prepared something here. So, he wants to spend about, what, minute and a half? Well, minute 25 almost precisely, talking about it's easier to prove God than oxygen instead of actually proving God. So I'm going to prove oxygen in less than 1 minute 25. And since it should be easier to prove God than to prove oxygen, well, then you should be able to prove God easier than that without philosophical arguments, of course, because I won't be using any philosophical arguments. I'll be using scientific data that was found in scientific tests that is used as a process to figure stuff out. Oxygen was discovered by Joseph Priestley in 1774 by shining sunlight through mercuric oxide as he was part of a series of experiments to disprove phlogiston. We can test it by setting on fire and breathing it in and surviving, you know, because it's, and like living for a while, because it's not just like, you know, helium and inert. But also the atom or elementary part is, also it is an atom with an atomic weight of 15.99, the atomic number 8, the number of protons in a normal atom, and is missing 2 electrons from its outer shell, 2 on the inner, 6 on the outer. It melts at minus 218.79 degrees Celsius, minus 361.82 degrees Fahrenheit, and boils at minus 182.96 Celsius, or minus 297.332 Fahrenheit. It's not hard. Like, we can prove it because we've proven it. Now, you, talking about God, have to go into arguments and, you know, all this stuff, but my point is, it's like the first bit of the tweets say, if you had any concrete proof, you'd be shouting it from the rooftops. And considering that you've already, in this point of the response, you've already said that, well, there's definitely facts in the Bible, and God is easier to prove, and like easy to prove. In fact, you even said easier to prove than oxygen. You know what I mean?
Well, to be fair, I think proof of oxygen, I think, like, again, like, I guess like the way in which science, like, I don't even think it's necessarily harder to prove God than it is to prove oxygen in many ways.
Then, in fact, you should have already done that instead of pontificating about why you don't have to do that. And the fact that you've spent all that time pontificating about how you don't have to do that actually shows how little evidence you actually have. Because as we go through the video, we're going to see that all you have is philosophical arguments and not actual proof. If you had some actual proof, like the way that we can prove and use oxygen to such an extent in our daily lives, you know what I mean? Maybe you can't use God, right? But if he is part of the universe, we should know, shouldn't we? And we should be able to find them. And if you could, you would shout it, but you haven't, because you haven't found anything.
So yeah, I don't think that it even is harder to prove than to prove oxygen. Yeah, and he hides outside the universe. Well, no, I mean, God, just because God is beyond nature in the sense that he actualizes nature doesn't mean that he's also not part of nature. Like, for example, Hegel describes nature as the face of God.
Who cares? Why should we care what Hegel says? Is God unknowable? I hear a cry of all the Christians going, yes, God is unknowable. You can't know God. So if you can't know God, Hegel can't know God. Neither can Anselm. Neither can Augustine. Neither can Polycarp, Eusebius, like Tertullian. None of them can know God. Doesn't matter how much they write really, really hard about how great God is and how much he must be real. They can't know anything about God because he is the unknowable. So if he is unknowable, well then, how is Hegel going to know he's the face of nature? How's he going to know? Because he can't know God. So if he doesn't know God, he doesn't know his properties, he doesn't know his values, he doesn't know any of that. All we know is something that was left in a book that only stopped being written a little bit, you know, when the printing press came about. Good old Gutenberg. You know what I mean? Like, you guys change stories all the time. That's why there's 50,000 different Gospels. The Gospel of Thomas, there's loads of Gospels of Peter and all this different stuff. You've got all these different extra-biblical Gospels that you don't use. It's almost like loads of people wrote stuff. You know, like, you even have, like, you know, your dear Paul, right? He didn't even write all the letters that are in the Bible. that are attributed to him. So, this is what I don't understand about Christians in general. They talk about proof, they offer up none, but if you can offer proof in the opposite, right, that there are definitely bits of the Bible that are false, right? They go, oh, nah, you just don't understand. Or if you bring up some kind of thing about, you know, like nature. Oh, nature, it's Hegel says. Well, nobody cares what Hegel says. Only people who can't really comprehend things for themselves give a shit what Hegel says. Because frankly, like I said, nobody can understand God. And if you can't understand God, what? So we've got a book that was written that has false books in it and false things in it that weren't in the original version, but we're supposed to, like, intuitively know the message that God left in there from the bits that were added on. Like, I don't know, the end of Mark, where they just went, do you know, it's a bit weird that Mary Magdalene doesn't tell anyone that Jesus resurrected. We best change that. So, if we can tell that all these things have changed, how are we supposed to take which bits are real, which bits aren't? And if we can't know the mind of God, then how are we supposed to really tell? Outside of textual criticism. And like, hey, we found this manuscript in the 6th century, and this has chapters in it that aren't in it in any manuscript previous. Oh well. God's word.
Ways it necessarily has to be that way. Why is nature good? Because God made it. Like, it is the effect of God's will. And, you know, Thomas Aquinas even points out that it is God willing himself. That God never does anything other than wills himself. He never...
How does he know? He does not know God. How does he know? Aside from he pulled it out his ass.
Never has to. All of creation is the culmination of God willing himself. So there is no, like, distinct separation between God and nature. And it is through nature that, you know, Thomas Aquinas and so on would say that we reason to God. And same with, like, Leibniz, it's the principle of sufficient reason. It is this going from effect to cause that leads us to believe that there is a God. So, no.
Leads us to believe. It leads us to believe. To believe. So, some guys, a long time ago, well, they believed in God really, really hard. And they made up some arguments that I agree with because I believe in God really, really hard. So they must be true. Do you have any facts and evidence to back that up? No, but I want it to be true. It's my hopes that it's true. My fervent hopes that it's true, like I said before. You know, it argues from opinions and hopes. I could prove God easier than oxygen.
Well, to be fair, I think proof of oxygen, I think, like, again, like, I guess like the way in which science, like, I don't even think it's necessarily harder to prove God than it is to prove oxygen in many ways. So yeah, I don't think that it even is harder to prove than to prove oxygen.
Mark, Psalm 16, 9, 20. The proof is in thy pudding. Lo, hark, remember it is easier to say that you have proof than to show it. I, thy God, say I am real. That be enough. Lo, the saints will make their arguments, be even that I am unknowable. But none thy less, they are bloody right. Okay, prove God. Well, Leibniz says. But I thought no one could understand the mind of God. Well, Leibniz does. He understands his essence. He understands his meaning. No one understands it better than Aquinas. Like, come on, really? But of course he says Aquinas. He's a Catholic, isn't he? Oh. So how's that Assumption of Mary doing for you? You know, that was made up in the 15th century. Came to him in a dream. In a dream!
That's wrong. And the proof that we get...
That's wrong! That's wrong! There's a lot of assertions there. You're not even describing half the shit you're saying. You know, that's the best bit where Leibniz says that because of fucking, this and, well, Hegel said he's the mind of God. Oh. And then you wonder why, right? Atheists say that you argue from hopes and opinions. And, like, you'll wonder why we go, hey, we want evidence. And then you say, well, Hegel said, and we go, that's not evidence, right? So, when we're talking about evolution, this is, and you know what? Actually, you're right. You're right. You did say before, how we perceive science and religion is different, right? So, and it is, because one requires evidence and the other doesn't. So, when Dawkins says, hey, I'm pretty sure evolution works like this, we tend to believe Dawkins because he's worked in the field a very long time, right? And done lots of very specific studies, come up with things like memes and stuff that actually helped, bring more of evolution to fruition. So, he can back up his work with his work and other people's work that come together into scientific consensus, right? So, when we come to argue about God, right? You want to talk about God as in both being real and, like, unknowable, right? He's in and outside the universe, but kind of undetectable by anything because we don't want you to detect it, right? But do you not find that weird? That, like, we could discover about quarks popping in and out of existence, that, like, electrons possibly teleport stupidly long miles. Like, the fact that we can find out that the Higgs boson, right, exists and isn't a particle, it's a field, right, says to me that the idea that we can't discover God with science if he's part of the universe is fucking laughable. Because no matter what it is, there should be something there that we can't just find. Like when we look out into space with our very big telescopes, wink, wink, we can see dark matter. Cold dark matter. And we know that it's cold dark matter because it doesn't emit light. It's dark. We can't see through it. So it's probably matter. And, like, it doesn't give off any heat. So it's cold. And it's a big mystery. It's like God. But we can find out what it is. But for some reason, God just is elusive. But you can say it's easier to find out than oxygen. But, it's just wrong. Just wrong. Just wrong. Carry on. It was just wrong. Just wrong.
And factual errors and arguments like the column. I mean, like the Calum argument isn't in the Bible or anything. I
mean, I know it's throwing you off, but it's just some bad grammar, my friend. I didn't say the Kalam was in the Bible. I mean, like, it's supposed to be a little comma there. The only proof that Christians give us, right, is a book full of incongruities and factual errors, right? And the Kalam. See, there's two ands there. You see, and factual errors and arguments. That's not grammatically correct, now is it? Of course, Twitter is full of people that are grammatically correct. I'm already complaining about me being grammatically incorrect. But I mean, like, you had a little bit more good faith in your argumentation. You could see that that's what that is. But that's just me nitpicking. I was wrong, man. I'm the one that fucked up the grammar. You know what I mean? Whatever. But, come on.
The Bible, is a book full of, like, various passages that can be read to contradict each other, which only shows the need for the correct reading as much as an interpretation, as much as an analysis of the text. Is it essentially full of incongruities? Maybe, depending upon how you read it, and that's the importance of the living tradition.
Living tradition. God's word is eternal, I thought it was just forever. It's just God's word and it's eternal. And like, oh, it's full of, incongruities, factual errors, I suppose. It depends on how you read it. So the fact that, like, one of the Gospels goes on about how Rome had a census where everybody had to go back where they were born. Like, that's really fucking stupid. You do understand that. That never happened. That is a factual error. So, like what? Like how eye that says Joshua conquered wasn't conquered in the time period that Joshua was supposed to be about. Weird, isn't it? It's almost like a factual error. It's like the closest thing we really have to an exit out of Egypt is something like, I don't know, a group of Levantine rulers called the Hyksos came in and ruled Egypt for 100 years and then were chased out by bloody war and settled into Levant and possibly turned into a group of peoples called the Apiru, or Abiru, Habiru, Hebrew, that were a bunch of nomads, like sheep herders, that like then assimilated into Canaanite, structures. But we've only got evidence for that. And because you provided me with so much more evidence, I could just assert it's real. Do your own research. I had to do it for yours. Because you don't want to explain anything. Because, you're just arguing for God. So all you have to do is just poo-poo it and say no. And then everybody goes, oh, well, that's very well done, isn't it? Oh, I forgot. Incongruities! Yes. So, it's an incongruity depending on how you read it. So how about, right, the Pharisees giving 30 pieces of silver to Judas, right, for turning over Jesus. So does Judas take that money? Does he buy a farm with it, right, and then trip over and explode, right, basically, into worms and whatever, that you can still see that mars the land to this day? Of course it meant then, not now, but, it's just a joke. Or did he give those 30 pieces of silver back to the Pharisees, and then they bought a farm, and then he hangs himself and then explodes upon the ground? Because those are two very different stories. Now, I know the correct reading, that people can supply you, because, the human brain's a wonderful thing. It likes to auto-complete for you. So, when you hear Judas had 30 pieces of silver, you go, well, that's in both stories. No, it certainly was. Yes, it was. Well, and then a farm was bought. Well, yes, a farm was bought. It was bought, wasn't it? It was bought by the Pharisees or Judas. Yes, it was. But you ignore that bit. Well, somebody bought a farm, so it doesn't matter anyway. Does it really matter who's the owner of the farm? Really? Huh? And then, he either hangs himself after he gives the money back and then explodes upon the ground, right? Or he trips over and explodes, and then... But you see, he still died and exploded, though, didn't he? So it's the same thing, except one was tripping over while farming, the other one was hanging himself, but he still exploded. So... It's almost like you got a bunch of different stories about Jesus, and, a bunch of different things that contradict each other, What you got? You got family lines. You got one that goes, here's shit tons of people, and then you got another one that goes, well, every 14 generations something special happens because we want that to be a special number, so we best change those names. Come on. I mean,
you can't. I think from a fundamentalist perspective, certainly yes. I think the Calum argument. I mean, I don't stand the Calum argument just to say that it is but it's not a bad argument. You know what I mean? I don't think it's correct, but I don't think it is the Calum ontological argument is a bad one. I think it just requires. I would have.
So what makes it a bad argument but still correct? Hi, editor me here. Do you know, I was rewatching it, and I've been stupid, or he has, I don't know. But did you notice that he said he doesn't think the column cosmological... I said ontological later on. It's the column cosmological. We both made this mistake. It's fine. But the column cosmological argument, he says he doesn't think is correct, but that doesn't make it a bad argument. What? This is the mindset of theists, though, isn't it? Christians and all the God botherers and everything, isn't it? It's well, it might not be correct, but if it makes other people believe it, then it doesn't matter, does it? Hey, it's okay to say and do arguments that aren't very, correct, but it's okay to use them because it fights for your point, so it doesn't matter if they're not correct. You might as well spread disinformation. Innit? Like, I mean, I didn't even pick up on it. Like, this is why it's edited me. It's not filming me, you know, because when I first watched it, I thought he said that he didn't think it was a good argument, but correct, right? And then I was editing it all together and was watching it, and then I heard him go, I don't think it's correct, but I don't think it's a bad argument. And I went, what? I don't think it's correct, but it's not a bad argument. That's like saying in evolution, right, that we pass our genes down to someone because, like, the sweat intermingles on each other. And, like, you know, it might convince other people. It's not correct. Oh, no, it has to be not correct in a good argument. Alright. So, like, the brain's a parasite, right? And, like, then it makes you think that it's part of your body, because that's what parasites do, isn't it? They make you think that that it is a part of your body and not the thing that's supposed to be there. Because, like, when you get hungry, it's not your brain being hungry, it's your stomach. It's got, like, its own... You know what I mean? That's in, like, I can go further. I have convinced people with that when I was being silly and very, very drunk. But, like, it's a good argument, but it's incorrect. It's a good argument, but it's incorrect. Just remember, right? That these people want you to believe in a thing. And people like me were the bad ones because we asked for evidence. Because they say things like that. I think it's a incorrect argument, but it's not bad. Wow.
Logical argument, like Hegel kind of affirms the existence of, like, the necessary existence of a perfect being. But, you know, in relation to the Anselm's ontological argument, but specifically of how we understand perfection, and the way in which he gets there is actually closer in many ways to the sort of Leibnizian principle of sufficient reason, and how this is necessitated. The existence of this perfect being is necessitated.
Do you have any original thoughts? Like, whatever. Well, Anselm made an ontological argument. And, like, well, that's really good, isn't it? Because, well, if we make up a bunch of possible worlds, and then we, like, super define what the most powerful being is, then we can say it's God if we define everything to be the way we want it to be. Because, you know, well, it can't exist without that. All possible worlds. What about a world without him? Well, no, it's not possible. Well, why is it impossible? Like, you can't... I hate the ontological argument. It's so fucking stupid. But it's in all possible worlds. Well, all possible worlds isn't a world without God. Like, if it's all possible worlds, then there's a world with God and the world without God. It, like, But, like, you've just sat there and said a bunch of stuff that other people have said a couple hundred years ago because you learned it in a classroom. So, you know, it's the way... That's the way forward, isn't it? It's the way forward. But Hegel said, and Anselm said, and this argument, and that argument, and this is my point. All you got is a book and a bunch of shit arguments. You don't have no proof. If you did, you'd be scrambling it from the rooftop, and you wouldn't be spending 15 minutes running around in a circle trying to grab your tail, going, maybe, you can't prove God like oxygen. I mean, you can, it's easier, but you shouldn't. It's like a cat, they're not the same thing. It's two different things. You know, it's like, come on.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm not really against the ontological argument as a whole, but I'm never been really convinced by the ontological argument alone. I've not really found it that compelling. At no point is there any proof of a creator or that atoms are created. I mean, what do you mean that atoms aren't created? I mean, like, what the fuck? like energy's not created or destroyed, but atoms can be created or destroyed, man. Like,
I just noticed another thing. He wants to act all smug, saying, you know, because, I think atoms weren't created, you know, quotation marks. Anyway. But he thinks that oxygen is a chemical compound?
I think that the proof of oxygen is very different. I think proving something which is essentially just, it's essentially perceiving like an atomic structure, or perceiving like the effects of that atomic structure, you know, like chemical compound. It's not too difficult to prove.
So like it can be chemical compound, because like with a compound you need more than one element, because it's a compound of other elements put together to make a chemical compound. You know. See, I get to be smug now.
You can split atoms and fuse them. Like we do this. Like we do this.
Yeah, we do.
Does he mean like created as in like from energy itself?
No.
Because like obviously the matter energy equivalence, like E equals mc squared, is widely established. So I mean there is like I don't see why you would say that an atom couldn't be created.
Because I'm gonna let you in a little secret. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to make fun about you struggling to read a little bit, but I'm going to make fun of this bit because it's kind of pertinent. You see where it says created? Do you see those quotation marks around the word created? Created, right? And the sentence that in what you put out a tweet, right? So part of the thing about language is living. Right? There's no secret about language. Language has clear defined meanings. Yes, it does. But also, those meanings can be changed by the context in which they're said. So, you put out a tweet that said, "Hey, atheist, throw me your best shit," right? And then I threw you a bunch. You only responded to one, but you know, whatever. And then I'm talking about how you have a bunch of the only proof that you don't talk about proof. You talk about hopes and dreams. And your only real proof that you have is like a book full of incongruities and factual errors and bad arguments like the Kalam ontological argument. And at no point is there any proof that God created atoms. That's what the thing is saying by created. You know, it's Twitter. You can't really, you know, put too much of what you want to say. You only get a limited amount of numbers, and I'm not paying Elon Musk. But like, I think that's pretty obvious. And I, to be honest, I think it's so obvious what I was actually saying. I think that you're disingenuously just brushing it to the side, right? Because you don't have any proof to the contrary that God did, you know, create atoms, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to make fun of it to try and make me look stupid, like I think that atoms were created. That's what it seems like to me. Because, like, you could look right there. It says created. Like, do you not know how punctuation works?
Like energy can't be created or destroyed according to the standard model of physics, but not atoms. Things having a start doesn't mean that they were made by a being. That would probably be a rejection of the...
It'd probably be a continuation of the last bit where it says at no point is there any proof that atoms are created. Things having a start doesn't mean that they were made by a being. It's kind of... all together. You can I keep on pointing at the screen where the stuff's on because I'm being the idiot now. But like, you see how it says like 1, 2, 3, you know, like it's telling you what order, and it's like one flowing living thing together into one big statement because it's Twitter and you only get so many things. But that's kind of what you were expecting though, wasn't it? Is that really it's on Twitter, so you can only put so many letters unless you've paid dearest Lord Elon Musk is petty £8 to be able to put more than 244 characters. Cheap fucker. Anyway, that aside, but you were expecting people to not really actually be able to do a full argument properly. That everything was just supposed to be this pithy little stupid thing like, God's really stupid. And you get to go, I am a big, astute, Catholic, scholar and theologian. And I just look at all these cretinist atheists coming along with their stupid little things. Oh, you know what I mean? Like, come on.
Was it like the second way within Aquinas' fifth ways? Everything has an efficient cause, like the efficient cause of the universe. I think largely it's explained more through, or more succinctly in his argument in relation to a final cause, that everything has to have a final cause, which means if it has a material first cause, that material exists, he has to provide an argument which why material exists teleologically, which means that material had to come into existence, and I think that's why Aquinas probably looks towards the efficient cause argument. But I would say that everything does have to have a part in which it was given has a fundamental purpose in reference to a logos, if you will.
So would you say that everything was created as the first and final cause by God? Like, come on. I just had to belabor that point one more time. But like, a lot of words for not really saying much in it. I sometimes wonder if this is what really philosophy's all about. You know, aside from just making yourself sound smarter because you use the words like teleological. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Yes, we know words have meanings, but like, just saying a lot of stuff like Jordan Peterson without really having a point doesn't do anything. Now, I'm guessing being a socialist, you're not really into him and you might find that insulting. Well, you should. But also, everything you've said there doesn't really say anything. You've said some people of like, well, you know, Aquinas' second way. Like, whatever. Well, he thought really hard and he thought that that's true. Well, that's not proof. You know what? I thought really hard and I thought that, I don't know, is an atom so big that we can see it and have it as a pet? Like, there isn't. But I can think of it, and I can think of it real hard, and I can think of reasons like why not. Like, well, the universe is big if you've been everywhere. Like, what stops anything from doing that? Oh, I know we've made bigger atoms and they fall apart quite quickly, but that could just be because man's made them, and it's not got God powers in them, and you've not been to the gigantic planet that was engorged by, you know, gamma rays from its triple star system and made everything grow because, you know, magic, God stuff, whatever. Yeah, I read it in a book. Like, come on. Just because Aquinas says something, it doesn't mean it's true in the slightest. Just because you might agree with his argument, a hope and a dream, that it is true because you hope it is, because you agree with him, you don't have any proof for it. Like as it started, if you had any proof, you'd be shouting it from the rooftops, and you don't have any proof. You're running around in circles going, oh, yeah, you know. Well, I suppose if you think about it this way, well, if you're thinking like what Hegel said this, then it means this. And it's like, right, but that's not proof. And like I said, you don't have any proof. And as the more and more we go into this, the more and more you prove by your actions that you actually don't have any fucking proof. And then you like to think you have proof. Thus confirming what I actually said. Well, I have to cut it there, because, like, otherwise the video's going to be like an hour and a half long, so you best watch the next part.